Hello, folks. Welcome to Rational Science, the only site on the internet that does physics rationally, directly from Frankfurt, Germany. It's 9 o'clock here, thereabouts, and we have a great day today. We're going to be talking about what is the language of physics. I mean, it's something for you to think about until we get there today, okay? Try to visualize what you think is the language of physics. Okay, there are different opinions, and we're going to try to make that objective. Anyways, I'm going to begin with a subject related to extinction, and that is what is going to be the last religion on earth? In other words, when extinction meets us, when we all get to meet our maker, uh, will all of us lose our faith? Will we all become atheists at the last moment? Or will we have more faith, more belief, hope? you know, which is going to be the case? Okay. And the reason I bring the subject up is because there was a miracle this week. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that miracle that was sent to the Vatican. Anyways, let's get started here. Here you see some of the symbols, typical symbols for different religions. And if you're one of those religions, you'll probably recognize the symbol or what the symbol represents, what religion it represents, right? Um, different people have different religions and they have these icons that represent them. Okay, and here are the religions by numbers, okay? This is out of the Wikipedia, and you can see that Christianity is #1 religion in the world in general terms, right? There are many parts to it. For that matter, that's the case for all other religions as well. And it's 2.4 billion in one part of the Wikipedia. Another site says 2.6. So thereabouts 2.5 billion people are Christians. But then you have that broken up between Catholicism and Protestantism, right? And some other minor religions like Anglicanism and so on. Lots of those in Africa, by the way. And then you have Islam and about 2 billion. You have Hinduism, 1.2, about half of Islam, and about half of that is for Buddhism, only half a billion. Okay, and you have other minor religions down at the bottom, including Judaism, which is you could say is part of Christianity in a way, right? Because that's what essentially the Christians believe, right? Okay, and what religion am I? Well, I'll put that up front. I'm not of any of those traditional religions, and I'm not, no longer, I used to be an atheist. I'm no longer an atheist either. Right now, I'm a religion known as scientist, okay? Scientists, physicists specifically, and scientists differ from all these other religions, atheism, theism of all kinds, and agnosticism and so on, in that we do not believe in belief, okay? So we remove the word belief, and that's something none of these other religions can remove from their notions of religion and so on. Yeah, religion is belief and opinion. That's what it is. Okay. Okay. So here we have one site that says, "What's the future of religion?" And it says a growing number of people worldwide claim that they believe life to end at death with no God, heaven, or divine plan. Okay. And there's absolutely more atheists around today than ever before. And finally, it says the number of people that declare themselves religious fell from 77 to 68, 9% decrease between 2005 2011. Self-identified atheists rose by 3%. So I guess a lot of people are losing faith, at least in the traditional religions. And the question is, where does that lead to? Is that on the way of displacing all religions, all traditional religions, and people finally end up not believing in God, or becoming atheists or agnostics or whatever? And that doesn't seem to be the case. Okay, here, let me show you. Um, Same site says that even though that's the case, that, atheists are gaining on overall on the planet, that's not the case. They're still losing in as a proportion of the global population. Uh, they say that this Pentecostalism is growing, and it's because there are a lot of people out there who want to go back to the old days, and they miss traditionalism, right? And a lot of these people also, they want these special things that they had in the old days, like speaking in tongues, which is the subject matter of today, really, because that's what mathematicians do uh, when they talk about, explanations or physical interpretations of physics. They speak in tongues. That's what it is. Faith healing, and that kind of thing. And they say that when experience usually inspires complete and unwavering religious conversion. Yeah, in other words, when people really believe, it's when they had an experience and they say, oh, I don't know what's out there, and just in case I'm going to believe, or they do believe in something unseen, untouched, you know, kind of like a rope. But the rope, we don't believe in the rope. We call it an assumption. So for those of you who are ready to criticize it, think again. The rope is an assumption. It's not a belief. Okay. Return to Christianity in its simplest forms. A lot of people, again, want to go back to the old days. Maybe they even want to hang or, you know, um, lynch people who do not believe like they do. That used to happen in the past as well. Okay, so I don't know if they want to go that far. Okay. Anyways, what is the future of religion according to this site again? Okay, and it says by the year 2050, the following is set to occur if current trends continue. Very big if there. Okay, the global population of Muslim believers will almost equal the number of Christians worldwide. In other words, Muslims, they're growing at a faster rate than Christians. Atheists, agnostics, and those who have no affiliation with any religion will comprise a declining proportion of the global population, even though such bodies are increasing in numbers in countries such as the US and France. So you have all these countries like in the Western world where atheists are becoming more and more, but compared to the global population, they're going to become a smaller percentage. So that's an irony. It's only the advanced nations. Now, the only thing I would say against that is that, as time goes by, you have people who have access to the internet, and they may change their opinions faster than they can be drawn into one of the traditional religions. The other thing that I want to mention, I don't think we'll make it to the year 2050. Okay, so that's another issue. So I don't think we have to worry too much about these trends, at least for 30 years, maybe 10, 15 at most. I don't know. I can't tell you for sure, but I don't give it too much time. Humans, and the planet. The global population of Buddhists will reach approximately the same number as in 2010, whilst Hindu and Jewish populations will increase in size compared to today. Muslims will comprise 10% of the overall European population. And I do believe that one because, like here in Frankfurt, I think I would say that 1/3, in fact, I think there's a number for that. About 1/3 of the population is of Turkish descent or Arab descent in general. And so, I would think that, yeah, the Muslims will be taking over and muscling the Christians aside, especially the traditional German religions, like Lutheranism and so on. India will retain Hindu majority, but will also boast the largest population of Muslims of any other country, overtaking Indonesia, simply because of the big population that India has, right? Christians will decline from more than 3/4 of the population in the U.S. to 2/3. Judaism no longer retaining its title as the largest non-Christian religion. Muslims will be more numerous in the U.S. than Jewish people. 4 of every 10 Christians worldwide will be based in sub-Saharan Africa. How's that for a trend? Okay, or a set of trends? And again, I'm not sure we're going to reach the year 2050, so we may not have to worry about these 30-year long-term trends. It may not happen. And I can't say for sure. Okay, I'm not going to say that I know for a fact. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm just saying I don't have a feel for us living another 30 years. Me for sure, I won't live another 30 years. But the question is whether humanity will live another 30 years. Okay, and some of the things that are going on in the world today, I think will accelerate, the time we meet our Maker. Okay, humans. Okay, so here's what the article said. It was from Hartford Courant, Hartford, Connecticut. It says, possible miracle at Connecticut church being investigated by the Vatican. Yeah, and then I'm not sure it's a miracle in the sense that, you have quantum mechanics, and it says that particles can appear from the void, from nothing. And obviously the universe appeared from nothing as well. They don't say it that way, but they insinuate it. Some do, like, you have Larry, what's his name? I can't remember his last name now. And he believes that something came from nothing. And there are a lot of so-called physicists, mathematical physicists, who believe the same thing. And this is more or less what happened in this church. It says the results of an investigation into the reports of a possible miracle at such and such church have been sent to the Vatican. What did they find? Well, on March 5, the Reverend so-and-so, pastor of such and such church there, which includes St. Thomas, reported that during Holy Communion, a lay person distributing hosts had found that the wafers had multiplied in the ciborium. Okay. Now, what's a host? Let's clarify that. Looks like this. It's a little wafer that they put in your mouth. It's a wafer of unleavened bread made with wheat flour, usually circular in shape. And the term ostia, which is a synonym of host, derives from the Latin hostia, meaning sacrificial victim, a sacrifice made to a deity. Okay, so that's what happened there. The host, the ostias, multiplied. And God duplicated himself in the ciborium, said so-and-so, right? God provides, and it's strange how God does that, and that happened. Okay, and so they say that this miracle happened, and they sent the miracle or the report to the Vatican so that I guess the Pope, my RG friend, Pope Frankie, that he could bless it or, call it a miracle. And this is the specific thing that happened inside the church, okay? It says, let me remove this. Give me a second here. It says the following, says, and as time went on, the hosts were being distributed. Fellow was giving the host to people, to the congregation, right? And then all of a sudden, the individual looked down, and all of a sudden there's more hosts in the ciboria, and kept giving the hosts out. There's even more hosts in the ciboria. Kept giving hosts out, and there's even more hosts in the ciboria. So by the time everyone received communion, and I came back up to the altar, there was the same amount, if not more, hosts that I gave the individual in the ciboria. So there were more like the Christ, giving fish to the people, to the crowds. This was more or less the same thing. He gave out the hosts, the ostias, and what happened was that he kept getting more and more hosts in his little thing there in Ciboria. And Crowley said also during the homily, neither he nor the Eucharistic minister had been praying for such a miracle. But he said it was something to think about. Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe it was the devil who was doing all this. I mean, how do we know it was God or the devil? I mean, maybe it was the devil for some reason that I cannot imagine. I mean, I don't know why God would do it. I don't know why the devil wouldn't do it. And they say, well, it's because they wanted people to have more faith. And so they made that magic trick where more of these hosts come, into being, again, from empty space, I guess, like in quantum mechanics, right? So you have more of them, and so people say, oh, now I believe because we had 10 hostias, we had 100 people, we were able to give hostias to every person in there, right? All these hosts, and it turns out that the fellow has some left over. And he only had 10 to begin with. So yeah, that is a miracle. No doubt about it. If it's true, right? Maybe the guy was drunk. Maybe he didn't count properly. Okay, I don't know. Okay. Okay. So here's the issue. The issue is, what St. Augustine said, that God could be outside the universe, right? And he's doing all these miracles from outside. He even made the miracle of creating the earth and the universe itself. And I got a problem with this under the rope model. Okay, we cannot tolerate God being outside the universe for a couple reasons, and let's go over some of these. Okay, here's one. Okay, here you have God outside the universe. The universe is just a single closed loop thread, according to the rope model. That's the assumption. Okay, and so we have a problem because God is not in touch. He's not part of that thread. And if God is not part of that thread, he has no way of contacting us. Okay, the only way he can contact us is if he's somehow in contact with the thread. And as you can see, he's isolated completely in this image here, and that's essentially what St. Augustine was saying. In other words, according to St. Augustine, God is not part of the universal thread, the single thread. Okay, and we're saying that that thread is what makes up all of matter, all the atoms, and all the interconnections that have this DNA-like form. We call it a rope that connects any two atoms in the universe. Okay, so if God wants to be part of the universe, if God wants to exist, God has to be part of the thread. Okay, if God is not part of the thread, he has no way to contact us, let alone us contacting him. Okay, that means we're not in communication with God, and God is not in communication with us. Okay, and then the other thing that God would have to explain is how he created this thread, how he created the universe, right? Everything, including the earth, that he created from nothing. I mean, what was there before the thread? Was there absolutely all that blackness, all that nothingness? Is that what was there before then? And so the person who proposes that God created the universe has to answer that question. Otherwise, he has no case in science and physics. Okay, and you might say, well, I don't know. God knows only how he did it. So here's the question for you. Here's God, right? He comes down to earth. Okay, we're going to assume that he's part of the thread now. Okay, he comes down to earth and he explains to you how he created something from nothing. Okay, do you think you would understand his manufacturing process? Do you think if he explained, if God himself sat down there at the park bench and said, look, let me tell you how I created something from nothing, do you think we would understand whatever he explains? Okay, and I suggest that we would. We have the intelligence to understand anything that anyone in this universe wishes to explain to us. I mean, you can have the Klingons come over and they can explain something in their part of the world, part of the universe, and they say, look, this is how we do things over there. This is some technology that we have there. Okay, can you explain it to us? Yeah, and the guy would say, look, this is what it looks like, and this is how it works, and this is how we made it. He would be able to explain all those things to you. Why wouldn't you understand it? What is it that you wouldn't understand? Okay, and again, the issue here is with God is the same thing. If God comes down from heaven or from wherever he is, the fifth dimension, and he sits down and he talks to you personally, one-on-one, and he explains how he created something from nothing, why wouldn't you understand him? That's the million-dollar question for you. Okay. Anyways, regarding what's going on in the universe, on Earth, among humans. Okay, here we have one headline says EU, the European Union, U.S. to pledge joint action over China concerns. It says that all these folks, politicians, etc., they got together here in Brussels and will pledge joint action to tackle concerns focused on China. Got them very nervous. China's on the news every second about non-market practices and coordinate their export controls on semiconductors and other goods at a meeting this month, a draft statement showed. Okay, so these folks want to block China in different ways. and China promises to take countermeasures. Okay, so I don't know if that's good for the world. The fact that we're dividing the world economics in two parts. Okay, assuming that's what's happening. Sometimes the politicians do mislead you for whatever reasons they have. But if it's real, if they end up doing it and they say we're not going to give you this because we're afraid you're going to use it for military purposes, and then the Chinese come back and say then we're not going to buy this other stuff from you or whatever, or we're going to put tariffs or whatever countermeasures they take, then it's going to be a pretty bad world. These things are not good. It'd be nice if we all cooperate, but here we're talking about absolute competition, which is what Mother Nature likes. Mother Nature doesn't like lions reaching an agreement and saying, look, you take that harem, I'll take this one. No, you got to fight for it. There's got to be competition. Mother Nature loves that stuff. She loves killing. She loves fighting, murder, cannibalism. She likes all that stuff. Okay, so we have to fight. Okay? But fighting does not conduce, in this sense, to a monopoly. It usually conduces to extinction. And not necessarily because we throw the bombs at each other, but we destroy the global economy. Once you destroy the global economy, there is no future. Okay, can't restart it back up again. Okay, and here, so there's one fellow at least, economist who, Nobel Prize, by the way, who warns against this. He says, hostile U.S. policies on China risk splitting the world into two blocks, urging the West to offer investment, not lectures, to developing countries. We may be in some kind of strategic competition, but that doesn't mean that we have to be quite so hostile. Okay? Washington is attempting to limit Chinese influence on critical supply chains. And this cannot be explained simply by concerns over Beijing's political system. We have many, quote, friends, right, who are authoritarian, but what we don't like is the economic competition and political competition. In other words, you've got countries like Saudi Arabia. They've got an authoritarian system. The United States is not completely dead set against them. In fact, they were quite friends until maybe a couple years ago, right? But until then, they were very good friends, and it was an authoritarian system, which continues to be, an authoritarian system. So it's not, but the United States has very little to fear from smaller countries like Saudi Arabia. China, that's a different story. So it says the West is investing very little in developing economics, and compared to countries like China. In other words, China is now getting into these developing countries, giving them money, loans, etc., and the West is not doing its share of that process. And so China is gaining influence by introducing its money, right? Essentially bribing money, buying them off or whatever. We give them lectures about what to do, and they, the Chinese, give them money. Yeah, that's the difference. The U.S. is not present in Latin America and Africa, and the Chinese are getting in there, right? While we say we're competing, we're not doing the investment. Politics in America has gotten into a very strange place. And I think the issue there is that the United States doesn't have that much disposable money to be able to loan it around. It's got problems of its own. China's growing twice as fast as the United States. And so at some point, if that's projected forward, they're going to catch up. And so that's what the United States and the Western world, Europe included, fear. And so this is where we're at. And then you have the war in Ukraine, which is not good for humanity either. And all I can tell you there is we don't know what's going on there, because the military on one side and the military on the other side, they just give you lies because they have to, have cheerleaders for their side. And so you don't really know what's going on. And this week they said, well, look, we've made some gains in this little town called Bakhmut. And the problem there is, it could be twofold. Maybe it's real, right? Maybe they made some gains, the Ukrainians. Maybe it's what happened to, Napoleon and Hitler, and where you had von Papen. He went with his army over there, and they kind of allowed him to come in. Same with Napoleon, And then they had this pincer movement where they slaughtered them. And so sometimes these are war tactics. And so they say, oh, we're losing, we're losing. It turns out they're not losing. They're running away, hoping, for the other side to be encircled. And so, and both sides know this. Okay, so uh, some are very cautious and saying, we're not going to fall into that trap. And the other guys are saying, are kind of saying, welcoming them in, saying, yeah, we're losing. You're beating us. And maybe that's not true either. So we don't really know what's going on over there. That's the reality, because whatever you get from either side is just a bunch of lies. Okay, they're just cheerleading their own teams. That's all they're doing. Okay, let's move on to a subject that we touched upon last week, and it turns out that a lot of people had lots of questions about, and that is gravity. How does gravity work? And yeah, people want to understand how gravity works, and everybody has their own idea, of course. And the only one we're going to reject here is all ideas based on particles. Okay, particles meaning pressure. Okay, no such thing. Okay, you can't produce pull with push. Okay, that's the issue. Okay, so keep that in mind. So when fellow says the following, says, no, Bill, that's not what gravity is. Gravity is not a pull force. Okay, yeah, we agree, and that's because he did not understand that. Okay, he thinks that we are saying it's a pull force, and I've said it many times already. It's not a pull. We use the word pull, okay, because we are pulled as an object. We're pulled downwards towards the center of the earth. But we're saying that every atom in our body is only under tension with the atoms on the earth. The rope is always under tension. There is no pull along the rope. And I don't know how many times to emphasize that, and people keep thinking of pull because we're used to using the word pull. I just want to clarify one more time. One atom does not pull on another atom. Okay? There's no pull along the rope. There's tension. Tension is not a pull like it is in the religion of mathematics. Okay? So let's just keep that in mind. Okay? But it says, even when you think you are pulling the air into your lungs, you are not. Okay? It says the air is simply flowing from a region of high pressure to a region of low pressure. All you are doing is letting the air rush into your lungs to fill the volume by stretching your rib cage. I'm actually explaining it with a real mechanism. No, you're not. What you're doing is describing, and you don't understand that. It takes a long time for you to understand that you're not explaining anything. You're just describing. And, well, let me just finish this up. It says, it's the same with gravity, electricity, and magnetism, but the field is not air. Okay, the fluid is not air. Okay, it's not some magical pull. A pull is illogical and irrational. Well, this fellow doesn't know how to argue it. Doesn't know how to talk. Okay, in science, if you're going to say it's illogical and illogical, you have to explain why you think it's irrational and illogical. But he leaves it there in his opinion, but he doesn't tell us how he justifies that opinion. So again, it shows you these are people who are not qualified to do science because they don't. I mean, if you're going to say something, back it up. And these people don't back it up. They just say something because it sounds good to them. Okay. And so, what is the problem I have with this? Well, let's go with that pulling the flow from a region of high pressure to a region of low pressure, or from high density to low density, right? So they have this idea that the molecules even out in the container, right? This is what they've been taught, and it's ingrained in them so much that they probably will not understand the argument that I'm going to make now, okay? So it's only for intelligent people what I'm going to say now, okay? Not for people like this gentleman, okay? And here it is. Here you have the Earth, and you have the different levels of air around the Earth. You have 760 torr, which is approximately, it's that's the value of our pressure here on Earth at sea level, more or less, okay? 750, 760. And then as you go out, you can see the levels drop. You get to a very fine air, and when you go even further, you get to a point where you get to universal, or you could say solar system level pressure, and it's a very, very light pressure. There's hardly any particles there. On the moon, it's been measured at 10 to the minus 12, 10 to minus 11, 10 to minus 12 torr. Yeah, I like the word torr because I use that unit because that's what I'm familiar with. That's the one we used in semiconductor processing. It's not probably the correct one for this, but it's good enough because the important thing is not what that number means. It's just that I just want you to see that there's hardly any particles on the moon, on the in the atmosphere of the moon. Okay, maybe some dust that is stirred up or whatever. And then here you have the solar wind on the left-hand side, and that's in the 10 to the minus 13 torr. In other words, the solar wind is even finer, less particles per cubic meter than on the moon. So on the moon, you have a little more pressure, you could say, than with a solar wind. And so the question is, why doesn't all that high density air, why doesn't it dissipate throughout the universe? Why is it stuck to the Earth? That's the question this fellow has to answer. Okay, here you have high density close to the center of the Earth, right, close to our surface, and you have low density as you move out. And you can see we don't need a container, which is another thing that these people have in mind. They say, oh, you need a container to have pressure. You know, they have this idea that particles hit against the walls and create this pressure. Yeah, that's true in a chamber. I worked with those quite a bit in my life, you know. But here we're talking about something that has no container. You know, the Earth is not contained immediately. You know, maybe you could say it's contained within space-time, the edges of space-time. We can even concede that. But between the Earth and the moon, there's no object, no container that contains the air on the Earth. And so the question is, why doesn't this air dissipate and just flow out into space? If it's like he says that it goes from high density to low density. That's all he's got to explain, okay? And I hope he doesn't say, well, because of gravity. Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so that's the issue. So this notion that he says that air or molecules or whatever flows from high density to low density, that's not an explanation. That's a description. Please explain the cause, okay? What causes that to happen? Okay, that's the question. Okay, here you have another fellow along similar lines. He says, talks about the solar wind. He says, you forgot to draw the solar wind in your absurd little animation. Aha. Do you dispute that the solar wind exists? If not, what is your justification? Okay, and again, all we can do is point to this, that the solar wind is 10 to the minus 13 torr. Okay, there's nothing there. Okay, essentially. That's probably the level, the maximum level we can achieve here on Earth with all our pumping equipment. Okay, you can maybe reach 10 to the minus 13. We used to work in a minus 7 range, and so this is about twice in orders, you know, what we used to work in the semiconductor industry. So we're talking about something. The solar wind is not a wind. These people think it's a hurricane or something. The solar wind is nothing. Okay, and so the first issue is that, you know, a lot of these flat earthers say, "Oh, hold it, but why don't the astronauts get killed with all these bullets that are flowing through space?" And again, they think that it's a hurricane or you know some kind of tornado or something. Who knows? The other thing that they confuse is that they confuse the solar wind, which is particles, with a magnetosphere, which is made of threads. The magnets, you know, magnets, the magnetic field, so-called field, that's comprised of threads that are swinging around. And again, that's not matter in the sense that an atom is matter. So anything like atoms and above we'll call particles, and anything below is just these threads. And so, you know, the solar wind does not really consist of magnetism, okay, which is threads. It just consists of particles, and there are very, very few particles in the solar wind. So yeah, we don't include it because it's irrelevant to gravity. Okay, that's why we don't include it. It's and again, it just shows this individual is ignorant of the basics of physics, okay? And same fellow says the following, says, there's something ironic about a rope theorist making fun of string theory. They listen and they say, oh, rope, that sounds like string, like wire, like a cable, or any of those words, synonyms. And so they say it's the same thing. You're laughing at another guy who's proposing the same thing as you are. Well, there are so many errors with what this fellow is thinking, and so let's put them up there. Here we have them. Rope is not a theory. Rope is known as a hypothesis, okay, an assumption. Theory is an explanation. A rope is an object, okay? God is not a theory. God is an assumption. That's a thing, okay? For those of you who think of God as a thing, right? As the guy with a magic wand who made the earth. That's different than God, the concept, oh, God is love. Oh, God is intelligence. Now you've made God into an abstract concept. And that's what you're praying to, if that's what you pray to, right? So we have to distinguish concepts from objects, okay? And we're saying that rope is an object, okay? Then we have here, rope is a hypothesis, again, an assumption. String, it's not an explanation, okay? And string is 1D, which is, takes it out of the realm of objects. There's no such object that is 1D or 0D, like in mathematical physics. Okay, in mathematical physics, you have singularities, you have points, and they're all 0D, no dimension whatsoever. They call these things. And then you have 1D, like lines or strings, which are, again, lines, mathematical lines, which they convert into physical things, So a string is not like the rope. The rope is 3D, okay, three-dimensional. Okay, let's get that right. The string is one-dimensional because it's a mathematical concept. It's not a thing. They're not going to do anything with this string. They will, but it's all BS because it's a concept. 1D, okay, 1D concept. String theory is a math description. Okay, it's not a physical entity. Okay. And they should call it loopy theory. Why? Because they have these loops, which I showed the other day. I'm going to show it one more time here, that they break and they weld, constantly. They're constantly welding and opening up magically because they don't explain the process. I mean, we don't know if they're sewed together, they are pasted together, glue. They don't explain the process of why these things open up and close up. Okay, that's different than the rope model. Okay, a rope model, it's just a rope, it just torques. Okay, that's different than, there's nothing there that is magical in that sense, that we're not saying that the rope breaks and comes together or anything like that. Okay, but that's what they're saying in string theory. Okay, and loops break and weld, what's the mechanism again? Gravitons reside in a hidden dimension. Remember, what's his name? Brian Cox? He was saying that the reason we don't see gravitons is they go to a different dimension. How do you pull with gravitons? Okay, that's the other question you got to answer. Okay, show me the mechanism that you're going to use to, to pull with discrete particles. How do you pull? And again, you can't say high density to low density, this absorption idea that these people have, because they cannot explain it with that. Okay. And here, let me show you what Matt Dowd said the other day concerning this. And he said, look, this is a pair of kinks in the string are whipped back and forth by the oscillating string, and the incredible mass in these kinks causes them to radiate gravitational waves, and so they slowly decay away. And what did Brian Cox tell us? Well, he says they decay away into unseen dimensions. Okay, so you figure out what they're trying to say there. Looks like that does look like magic. That is magic, and that's what you're receiving from the establishment. Okay, same fellow says, if oceans only push one way, then what about riptide? Poor people. Okay, let me show you a riptide. Here, I'll illustrate it for you. Okay, here's the riptide. Okay, here's a river. And the question is the river pulling or pushing on the logs? Okay, where's the riptide there? Okay, and the same with the riptide that this fellow's talking about. In other words, the riptide that's produced by the moon. Okay, the tide goes back. The question is, are you being pulled or are you being pushed by water particles? Okay, is there a vacuum being produced and that's why you fall? Okay, these are the questions you need to answer. And so let me show you here what causes the tides. That's where this fellow should begin so that he can talk intelligently. And here it is. This is from NASA. And you can see what causes the tides, and it's the moon. They say it's gravity, whatever gravity is. The moon is pulling through nothing at the water. Okay, and the question is, how does the moon do that? Okay, is the moon in contact with the water, or is it black magic? Meaning the moon is not in contact, but somehow affects it from action at a distance. From again by magic. So that's the first question he's got to answer. He's got to answer, how does the moon produce the tide? Okay, that's where he's got to explain the pull that you see there. Okay, and here's what causes the tide. You can see different tides, different parts of the year, and the sun also plays a role in there. Okay, because when you have the sun and the moon on the same axis, well, you have probably more pull, like there. Okay. Whereas when you have it on the other side, well, they're pulling in different directions, 90 degrees to each other. Okay, so that gives you an idea what causes the tides, how it's done, how Mother Nature does that. Okay, and that's what this fellow needs to understand. First, explain the tides, then you can explain the rip tide. How you get pulled into the water, if that's what's happening. Are you being pushed by the water? Are you being pulled by the water? Like the logs there. Okay, and St. Paul says, insistent, he says, passing your hand through the rope sounds like black magic to me. Yeah, because they're always thinking of touch. Okay, they've got touch in their minds. Okay, and he continues, and he says the following. He says, connecting objects with ropes does not explain where the pull between objects comes from. You can try it yourself by connecting two dead elephants with ropes. Nothing will happen. Again, has all these notions of touch. He has to introduce touch in there when we say you can't touch the rope. Okay. The twirling rope animation makes no sense given that the earth does not spin on an axis pointing towards the sun and vice versa. You can't recreate that animation in reality using real spheres and ropes. An animation that is not consistent with reality is worthless. And so what can we say? We got to show them, what the same argument that we use against Einstein. Okay, here it is. Okay, here you have different parts, different planets. Okay, you have the moon and the earth. They're on the same axis. So the moon causes these blackouts, which we call eclipses, right? Because it stands behind, at some point, it stands between the earth and the sun. Okay, and so it essentially the moon goes approximately on the same plane as the earth. When you move to Oberon, which is one of the moons of Uranus, the moon goes over the pole of Uranus towards the sun and away from it. Not like the moon there, our moon, which goes approximately on the same plane as the equator, more or less, close to it. This one goes over the poles. And then when you look at Charon, the moon of Pluto, what you see is that it's got this bullseye pattern with respect to the sun. Okay, and my point here is that the spin of the planet is unrelated to the threads, to the ropes that are that are holding every atom of the Earth, for example, to every atom of the sun. The sun twirls the Earth around itself. That's the orbit, but that's not what causes the spin. Okay. And again, what you see in these other cases, again, has to do with the spin of the planet. In other words, the Earth spins the moon around itself. In other words, the moon orbits the Earth because the Earth swings it around. The same goes with Uranus, and the same goes with Charon, okay, Pluto and Charon. So the spin itself is not the cause of, or in reverse, you can't say that the rope causes the spin, okay? It's the fact that every atom on Earth is connected to every atom of the sun only explains the orbit of the Earth, not why the Earth spins on its axis, which is spins at a what is it, 24-degree angle or whatever. Okay, so you got to separate spin from orbit. Okay? And a fellow has to understand these basic things of physics, and he doesn't. He's just thinking that he's making a great contribution to science by criticizing something that he doesn't understand. Okay, here we have another fellow, and he says, technically there are many things we've said that just move and nothing is in contact with them. So he's saying that things move, but not always is there something in contact with them. Okay, atoms moving in the void from Greek thought. They move and nothing is contacting or forcing them to. Okay, well, we could go on with several things that are wrong with his train of thought. Let's just get to the basic one, and that is the following. When you see the Earth rolling around the sun, okay, if something did not deflect, change the direction of the Earth would just go straight. So yes, moving, but if nothing changes it, nothing comes in contact with the Earth, it would continue to go straight and straight out of the solar system. But that's not what we observe or what we measure or whatever. That's what we know, we understand. That's not this description that we have out there. Okay? This is what we have. We have that the Earth continues to roll around in circles, more or less, around the sun. Okay, so the question is, what causes the Earth to change direction? That's the million-dollar question. So this is a simple one that he should be able to answer, because he's saying nothing comes in contact with the Earth. Well, if nothing comes in contact, why is it changing its direction if Newton says unless something comes in contact with the Earth, okay, or any object that's moving in a given direction, it will not change that direction. The only reason it changes that direction is because something, a thing, comes in contact with the Earth, okay? So what is it that comes in contact with the Earth? Well, here you have it, okay? It's the threads, the ropes, okay? And so the sun swings the Earth around by these ropes. Every atom on the Earth is connected to every atom of the sun. And now we can explain very easily why the Earth changes its direction every second, okay? It moves more or less in a circle. Okay, and so now you have that something. The something is ropes. You don't want to put ropes in there, no problem. Tell me what physical object forces the Earth to change direction? And you say, well, nothing, because we can't see, we can't touch anything out there. And then what you're doing is you're doing black magic. That is black magic, because you're saying there's action at a distance and there's nothing in physical contact with the skin of the Earth, and yet the skin the Earth is moving in a circle. It's changing its direction constantly. Okay, so that's what you got to answer. Okay? Hopefully you don't say space-time, because space-time is what? A concept. Okay, bunch of coordinates. That's all the space-time is. And we're getting there also. Here we have, if you got a relativist video to criticize here, okay? I got a relative. Yeah, I've seen this video, and I've seen others similar to that, and they talk about 3D scenario for space-time rather than the 2D scenario. Okay, so let's go with that so that you know what I'm talking about. Okay, here it is. I went to the site, and this is what the site has. And the important thing here is that it has 2.3 million views. And the site itself has almost, 500,000 subscribers. And the question is, with 113,000, right, upvotes. And this is what they're going to show. They're going to show this 3D space-time. And instead of the Earth just weighing it down, what you're going to have is all this 3D space-time moving towards the center of the earth. That's what they're going to show. Okay, and so you can see how many people get sucked in by this nonsense, and they just believe it, and they don't even know what they're believing in. Okay, they just tangentially capture some idea there and say, "Oh, okay, I understood what they're saying." They didn't understand squat. Okay, here it is. Okay, so here's the 2D space-time. Okay, the typical one. You know, you have the little Earth going around the sun, and these fellows are saying that's not the way it really works. Okay, that's silly. You know, the bending of space-time downwards. Okay, and by the way, this is what all mathematical physicists believe in. That's what they describe. But this fellow says, oh, I know more than all of them put together, because that's not the case. This is ridiculous. You cannot really use this as an analogy for what's happening out there. Okay? So how is he going to show the rotation then? Okay, because that's what we want to understand. Okay, we want to understand why the Earth doesn't go flying out of the solar system. And of course, he's not going to explain that. He's just going to try to explain gravity to you. And he said, no, gravity works in a different way. It works this way. And here you see it. He illustrates it. He says, look, the Earth is sucking all this space-time out of space-time, out of the space, I don't know, out of the fourth dimension, fifth dimension, sucking it into its center. Okay, it just absorbs it. And that's what all these people have in mind. They say it absorbs particles, it absorbs space-time, it absorbs gravitons, whatever it's absorbing, it's all going towards the center of the Earth. Okay, because, you know, you let go of your pen and it falls to the center of the Earth. So he says, this explains it. See, that would explain why the pen falls to the Earth, to the center of the Earth. Okay, so let's see if they can answer this. First, you can see that he's not explaining why the Earth doesn't flow out of the solar system, which is the main point. The other one that explains why the Earth doesn't go out of the solar system, it's ridiculous, but it explains that. It says, look, you know, the Earth is rolling or sliding along this time warp. No, time is warped around it, and the Earth, the skin of the Earth is coming in contact with this warped time. Okay, that's the answer. Here, you won't see that. There's no explanation for why the Earth doesn't go out of the solar system, but then here's a situation. Here we have all these planets, okay, and stars, whatever you want to put in there, okay? You can put anything you want. And what it's doing, every one of them is sucking towards the center of the planet, okay? And so the question is, you know, if it's going towards the center of the planet, where's the slack coming from, okay? That's you know, is it pulling space-time out of what? You know, because they're all pulling towards themselves. Are they ripping space-time apart? Is that what's happening here? And again, what you need to understand, above all, is that, you know, what you're staring at, really, when you're looking at all these lines, is you're looking at this. You're looking at coordinates, which I discussed the other day. That's what space-time is. It's just a set of coordinates, okay? And that's what these people are saying is being sucked in, coordinates. That's what you're staring at. That's what all those lines are, okay? And so you're looking at this, and that's being sucked in. And so the question is, you know, here you have space-time. This is what another fellow illustrated, right? And you have the space-time being dragged towards the center. It doesn't explain where that extra space-time is coming from. Okay, are you ripping it from space-time itself? From what? And then it doesn't explain at all why the Earth goes or does not fly out of the solar system. You know, how do you explain that part? Okay, how does this explain that? The orbit of the Earth. And so, yeah, and people just put likes and oh, I liked it. I thought they were right. You know, the two-dimensional version of space-time is irrational, but this one's more irrational. They don't realize that. Okay, so let's get on to the subject matter of today, which is what is the language of physics? Okay, and you know, lately, you know, we've been looking at the Universal movie, okay, which is this thing here. It's a tool. And we're saying that all these words, the ones that are static concepts, belong in a single frame of the universal movie, whereas any of the bottom ones there, those are dynamic concepts. Why we call them dynamic? Because they take up at least 2 frames in the universal movie. You need at least 2 locations to talk about motion, position, the position of mathematical physics, by the way. Ether, field, energy, any of those are all dynamic concepts, okay? And so we've been talking about some of these words, and there are several more that we covered in the last few weeks, okay? So, that's where we stand. That's physics, okay? Because we're defining our terms. We're saying whether it's a static concept or a dynamic one, and we're justifying it. The mathematicians are saying, Bill, you're wasting your time. Okay, why am I wasting my time? Okay, let's find out. Okay, you're wasting your time because this is the language of physics, mathematics. Okay, and here you have one site and says, mathematics has a vital role to play as the language of physics. As such, the part it plays must be subservient to the physics. And these are not the only people who say it. Here's, just in case, a little more volume there to help them out, okay? This is another site, Nut, okay, that says, with the concept of differentiation, integration, and differential equations, any theory could be explained. Theory can be explained with an equation? I'd like to see them do that. I mean, I don't know what they're talking about, but you cannot explain with an equation anything. I cannot explain, why this pencil falls, the cause, right, with an equation. I can tell you how fast it goes or that sort of thing. It's not going to tell me what caused it. And that's what an explanation is. But these people don't understand that, okay? All the laws governing the nature could be expressed based on mathematical equations. Yeah, laws maybe, whatever that is in mathematical physics, right? Over there they can talk about laws. There are no laws in physics. In physics, all we have are explanations, okay? Hence, mathematics can be regarded as the language of physics. So these people believe that mathematics is the language of physics as well, okay? And just in case we have one more, okay, here it is. It says, mathematics as structural language of physics, of physical thought. And it's a paper this fellow wrote from Brazil, okay? Mathematics is definitely lodged in the core of physics, hence becoming evident when encountering the products of its scientific activities. Okay. And it says mathematics enters the physical discourse by means of functions, equations, graphics, vectors, tensors, etc., etc. And I don't know how he justified that. He's just saying it does. Okay. I guess he just memorized this in high school or college and just spitting it out, like poetry. Owing to the important role of mathematics has played in the organization of physical theories, some authors view its adoption as a criterion of rationality and not merely as indicative of conventionality or empiricism. So all these folks, they've been educated or brainwashed or whatever you want to call it, to believe that mathematics is the language of physics. And I'm saying that, my language of physics is a little different than theirs because it doesn't involve any equations. And so you say, well, where did they get that idea? Okay, and here's probably the source, okay, a fellow named Galileo in the 17th century. And he wrote in his book, Dialogue Concerning Two New Sciences, 1638, a couple of years, 4 years before he died. And Galileo says the following, he says, philosophy, meaning philosophy of nature, right, is written in that great book whichever is before our eyes, I mean the universe. But we cannot understand it if we do not first learn the language and grasp the symbols in which it is written. Aha. Yeah, which one is that? The book is written in mathematical language, and the symbols are triangles, etc., right? Without whose help it is impossible to comprehend a single word of it, without which one wanders in vain through a dark labyrinth. Mathematics is the language in which God has written the universe. And believe me, if I were again beginning my studies, I would follow the advice of Plato and start with mathematics. So this is probably the source, or at least one of the sources. The other one could be Descartes, René Descartes. All these people, they thought, just like Plato and Aristotle and Euclid, all these other folks from the days of the Greeks, they really thought mathematics was a synonym of physics. Okay, because they said this is the language in which we represent. And what are they representing? They're representing descriptions. They're not representing explanations. Okay, there's a difference between a description and explanation, and that's what they never figured out, that if physics is explanation, it's got nothing to do with math, which is only description. Okay, so there's a difference between those. Okay, and so we look up definition of physics. What is physics? What do people think physics is? And just in case, I'm going to point to official sites, okay? Because otherwise people say, oh, you got that from the layman out there. He doesn't know. Okay, so let's get official sites. Here's a couple of physicists from Quora. One says, physics is certainly tries to explain how the universe works. Explain, okay? Physics is the science which tries to understand nature, why and how, okay? So, physics is, an explanatory science, a discipline. It had better be, because that's what physics is. That's what people want to know. Like if you go to Quora or you go to the Stack Exchange, another site, and you go to Hyperphysics, some of these places, they'll all try to, the questions people ask them are always the same. Another one, how stuff works. People want to know about physics. And what do you mean by that? They don't want to have an equation. They want to say, how does this work? How does gravity work? That's what I want you to tell me, okay? How does magnetism work? What causes, right, this to attract that? Isn't that a question of physics, or is it a question of philosophy? No, this is a question of physics. People want to know, how this happens physically. Okay, so this is not a question of philosophy or any other discipline for that matter. No, these are questions of physics. They want an explanation of the mechanism. And once we understand that, we're done with physics, especially for all this invisible stuff that no one has been able to answer in mathematical physics. Okay, so what is an explanation? Well, explanation is a theory. That's what it is. That's a synonym. The word theory and explanation are synonyms. Theory is not a description, which is what mathematical physicists, mathematicians, they made those two words equal, and that's not true. They're not synonyms. Okay, so theory, a system of ideas intended to explain something. That's what Oxford Languages Dictionary says. Theory is a carefully thought out explanation. That's from the Field Museum. Theory, generalized explanations of how nature works. Okay, that's what a theory is, especially a theory of physics. That's out of Wikipedia. Theory, a plausible or scientifically acceptable general principle or body of principles offered to explain phenomena. And a final one, Cambridge Dictionary. Theory, a formal statement of ideas that are suggested to explain la 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 la. Okay, that's what it is. Explanation and theory are synonyms. Okay, a theory is not a description. Math can only describe, therefore mathematics has no theories whatsoever. That's why they talk about laws, whatever those are, and then they kind of bunch it in there with theories and say, we have a theory of general relativity. Well, the theory of general relativity is not the equation. That's just a description. The theory of general relativity is warp space. What do you call it? Geometry? Geometry of space-time. That's different than saying this is the equation. The equation is just a description. All that an equation does is describe. Okay, so here we have that these people are speaking in tongues. Okay, someone says, what causes the pendulum to fall to the floor? Einstein, right? And a smart fellow there, the Einstein guy, Disipo, he says the acceleration of gravity, which is 9.8 meters per second square. Yeah, he gives them a mathematical answer. That's not the question that was asked. But they say that this is what a theory is. At least the mathematicians believe that this is the notion of what they call theory. No way. Theory is an explanation. Okay? An explanation is not a description, which is the only thing that math can do. Okay, so here we have a couple official sites. Okay, and we're going to look at the words that they use. Okay, the language, the vocabulary, okay, that these people use. And here's one, Palm Beach State College. Okay, and you see all these words, and what you won't find in there is words of physics. What you find is words of mathematics. All these words are mathematics, and you say, well, I can't go through all that. Let's simplify this so that you can see it real easily. We'll take all the definitions out of there. We'll just leave the words. Okay, so there you see all the words. Okay, and see, all those have to do with mathematics. Has nothing at all to do with physics, with causes and with mechanisms. Okay, it turns out that if you look up the definitions of all these words, half of them at least, okay, here's half of them, they have the word object in the definition. Okay, so all these words have the word object, and nowhere do you have the word object defined. So this is what's so strange here. These people are saying that you need the word object to define all these words of mathematics, and not one of them, not one word in there is the word object. Not one defines the word object, or the word exists for that matter. Physics is the science of existence, okay? And they don't define the word exist either. So neither object or exist is on that list. Here you have another site, a famous one, Hyperphysics. And if you go to the right side of that website, you'll find all the words. And they have tons of words there. Not one of them is a word of physics. Not one of them includes, that list does not include the word object or the word exist. So how can you do physics without an object is the question. And why haven't defined them? If you go to high school or college, and you don't have to take physics per se, like, high level. I mean, just an introductory course. You buy any textbook of physics out there and just open it up and look at the vocabulary or the glossary or whatever. You will not find the word object ever defined. No mathematician in the last 10,000 years has defined the word object. It turns out you can't do physics without objects. I mean, how are you going to explain a phenomenon, a mechanism, what caused something to happen, if you haven't defined the word object? You don't know what an object is. And so this is interesting that this crucial word has never been defined by so-called physicists, mathematical physicists. Why? Because they do math. They don't do physics at all. And here's another site, just in case, okay, Quintessential Instructional Archive. And again, when you look in there, you find all these words of mathematics, and you don't find a single word of physics. Now, you won't find the word object or the word exist. What you'll find is words which are irrational, such as energy and mass. Okay, I mean, mass is not irrational if you just say quantity of matter. But they also say that mass is inertia, or measure of inertia, or whatever, and that's when they screw it up completely. No, inertia has to do with weight, not with quantity of matter. Quantity of matter is you don't measure, you count. And inertia, you measure. And weight, you measure. Okay, so yeah, inertia is a different one. It's like the counterpart, like I said the other day, of weight. Okay, so here we have, because of that, you have sites like NASA, and they don't use the word gravity. They don't define the word gravity. You say, what is gravity? Because that's what they're trying to explain here. They say, no, we're going to tell you what gravity is. Okay, what is gravity? It says anything that has mass also has gravity. But you haven't told me what gravity is. What do you mean it has gravity? Like I have 10 cents in my pocket? Like that? It has gravity? Objects with more mass have more gravity. Okay, so they never tell you what gravity is, and then they have this ridiculous, little ball going around, the center of mass, right? And Earth's gravity comes from all its mass. And again, they just tell you where it comes from. They never tell you what gravity is. And these are the words that people want to have answers to. They want to have a definition on the one hand, and they would like a mechanism. They would like to have an explanation, a physical interpretation. They never get it. Okay, so where does this take us? Well, all I can do is give you the rational version, the scientific version, okay? And that's what we contrast against this mathematical language, this irrational language called mathematical physics. Math is math, physics is physics, never the twain shall meet. Math can only describe, physics is about explanations, about theories, right? Mechanisms, causes. And you cannot explain with equations, with numbers, with formulas, which is what math is about. So math and physics never will meet. And the first religion really to try to merge them was geometry. Because geometry has, on the one hand, the triangle, which belongs to physics because it's an object. It's a thing. Okay? Why is it a thing? Because it has shape. That's the definition. And then they go in there and they say, let me tell you about angles. And they're not talking about just the qualitative angles, like, this is perpendicular to that. No, they're talking about how much, how many degrees. Okay, inside, for example, a triangle, the inside angles of a triangle sum to 180 degrees. Okay, that sort of thing. So they're concerned about numbers. And so they try to merge quantities with quality. And that's why they forgot about giving qualitative explanations to phenomena. Okay? And yeah, we say, look, for physics, you need a different kind of language. And it's a language that the mathematicians never defined. Okay? So here we have physics, causes and mechanisms. That's what physics is. Explanations. Okay? Explanation of a mechanism requires objects. You cannot explain a mechanism, cause, right? Unless you have an object. You have to identify the object. And if it's an invisible object, you still have to identify it. For example, air. Air is invisible. It's not an object. It's not a thing. Is it a concept? No, air is a physical object. Sorry. Okay? Air is what blew your house down. Fast air. Okay, fast moving air. But air is the object, the thing. Okay, that was in motion. Okay? So you need objects. Otherwise, you can't explain any mechanism. And what people want to understand in physics is mechanisms. Okay? The language of physics is not mathematics. Okay? Mathematics. It's what? Illustration. You need to illustrate. Yeah, if you're going to just give me the illustration and I'll understand the mechanism. You can explain a little bit there if you need to, no problem. But physics is illustration. You need to illustrate. Because you have objects, you had better be able to illustrate in physics, okay? And all these people, they just want to talk about numbers. That's not an illustration. That's just a concept that describes it, in the abstract mode. Okay? An equation cannot tell you what physical object is doing the acting, it plays the central role in your theory, okay? So equation is worthless in that sense. And so, we end up with this. We end up with the foundations of physics, the key words that you absolutely need to define in order to do physics. What is physics? Explanations, physical interpretations, causes, right? Mechanisms. That's what you need. Physics requires an object. So you absolutely need to define the word object. You can't do physics without an object. That's the first rule, what I call the golden principle of physics. Okay? And there you have what I call the foundations of physics, which are the words that you need to define the vocabulary that you absolutely need to do physics. You cannot do physical interpretations, physics, without these words. You absolutely need to define these words. Okay, you cannot escape that. And it's, what is something? Well, it's that which has shape. And then you have a bunch of synonyms. What is nothing? It's an antonym of something, right? The opposite. And what is that? That which doesn't have shape. And there you have some synonyms. Okay, space. So an object and space are antonyms. Then you have to have distance. You have to show distance between any two objects. Why? Because you're going to talk about location, which is the set of distances from one object to all the others in the universe or in your system, whatever system you're explaining. Exist. It's an object that has location, meaning distance with respect to all other objects, right? God wants to be part of that. He better have distance with respect to all the other objects. And since under our proposal, there's a single thread, God had better be part of the single thread. Otherwise, we're not in touch with him and he's not in touch with us. He's working action at a distance, and that's black magic. And you say, well, God can do that. Yeah, he can, but I can't. So if God wants to communicate with me, God had better do something better than black magic. Okay, he may be all powerful. I'm not. Okay, that's one issue. The other one issue is that God has to touch me in some way. And you say, well, no, he doesn't. He can penetrate your brain and talk to you in your brain without touching you or without entering your head or whatever. Well, again, if it's inside my brain, it's going to change the atoms in there, the way I think, etc. He's got to do some touching. There's no way he can avoid that. He may work without touch. I can't. I need to work through touch. Okay, so if he wants to change my mind, he's got to touch something in my head. Okay, so keep that in mind. God can be all powerful all he wants, but he's got to be part of our universe. I mean, if he wants to be part of our universe, if he wants to exist, right, at least for us, he's got to be part of the thread, the single thread. Okay? He's got to be made out of atoms, and every one of his atoms has to be connected to all other atoms. Otherwise, he's got black magic. One issue, and the other one is that if God comes down to earth, he should be able to explain to you how he communicates or how he made something out of nothing. He can explain all that, and you should be able to understand the mechanism. Why not? I mean, he can talk about anything. He can talk even about the 26th dimension if he wants. You say, well, I don't understand all that. Yeah, you'll understand what he's trying to tell you. Okay? You'll get the overall picture. So if God wants to tell you that he made something out of nothing, you should be able to understand it. Okay? He should be able to explain it. Besides, he's all powerful. He should know a way that he can explain it to you in such a way that you would understand it. Motion, two or more locations of an object. And what is a concept? Well, it's a word that invokes or embodies two objects or two words which are momentarily treated as objects. Okay? And with that, I'll see you next week. We'll see you then.